Welcome to the Youth Sport Podcast. My name is Rihanna Poskin, and I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly within youth sport. It feels great when a kid comes up to you and says, "Coach, because of you, my life changed in the best way." It would feel awful to hear that because of you, the coach, a kid doesn't want to have anything to do with it ever again. I believe that kids deserve to have fun, to learn, to grow, to compete, and to play in a great environment. Join me as I interview guests that spill the tea on youth sport in order to help you make an enormous impact with kids right now. This episode of the Youth Sport Podcast is brought to you by Lululemon. I am part of the Lululemon Collective and will receive commissions when you shop through my link. Buying something for you or your loved ones, like my favorite warm down joggers, helps me to continue to bring interesting and empowering conversations for everyone. I have to tell you, when I'm coaching, I want to make sure that I'm dressed appropriately, I'm comfortable, my clothes stand up to all kinds of random situations, and that I have pockets. You never know who's going to ask you to hold something for them or what random things you need to carry with you. The Lululemon warm down joggers take care of all of my needs. I invite you to find your go-to item by browsing through the entire Lululemon site. You won't be disappointed. Please use the link provided in the video description below to start shopping. Welcome to the Youth Sport Podcast. I am back with another amazing guest, and I'm so pumped for you guys to hear her story. Erin McLeod is with us today. Erin is a professional athlete playing soccer for top teams around the world and closing in on 2 decades as the goalkeeper for the Canadian national team. She was inducted into the Canadian Olympic Hall of Fame in 2019. A two-time Olympian, Erin competed in the 2008 Beijing Games and won bronze medal in London in 2012. Just 3 years later, in her fourth FIFA World Cup appearance, Erin helped lead Canada to a historic quarterfinal finish. Erin's interest in mindfulness, which we're going to talk about today, began in the lead up to the 2012 London Olympics, when she began working with renowned sports psychiatrist Dr. Carrie Evans. While the mental game has always been a part of her training, this helped Erin achieve significant growth that has directly contributed to her success on the soccer pitch. In the years since, Erin has become a certified mental trainer and uses mindfulness in her training regimen and day-to-day life. Now, outside of her professional career, Erin is a motivational speaker and outspoken advocate for human rights, women's empowerment, and LGBTQ+ rights. She is a representative on the Canadian Olympic Committee's Athletes Commission and an active pro ambassador for Athlete Ally. Erin is also an avid artist, musician, and tattoo designer. Welcome, Erin. I'm so excited to have you today.
Thank you so much. What an intro. Wow.
Well, we had to tell everybody a little bit about you because we're going to dive in. This might be a little bit of a different conversation because we want to know your story. We want to know a little bit about the history that led you to where you are today, the struggles. And the attempt of this podcast is to help not only youth coaches and youth parents, but also youth athletes. And so I really feel like so many things that you went through could be very beneficial to what our young people are dealing with today. So I would like to start with, where are you right now in this crazy time?
Oh my gosh. I am in Reykjavik in Iceland. Long story short, you'll probably hear that a lot. I was in Orlando. I had made a decision to go back to the US and play in the NWSL. And then, of course, the pandemic took the whole world by storm. And unfortunately, we had some cases on the Orlando Pride leading up to the Challenge Cup. And so we had to withdraw from that tournament. And of course, I was so amped up because finally I had suffered a lot of injuries. So after like a year and a half of not really being able to play consistently and being healthy, I was healthy. So I came to Iceland, to Reykjavik, this wonderful club I'm playing at, Starnan, is where my girlfriend actually grew up in this community, and they were like gung-ho to have me on loan. And so I've been here, and we just had actually a 2-week break because of surge in numbers, which is happening around the world, obviously. But we're back on training, very cautiously. But yeah, so I'm here. They've extended the season, which I know I'm Canadian and I'm supposed to be super tough when it comes to the cold temperatures, but I am not super keen about playing until the middle of November. But it is what it is,
Yeah, well, we just had a first bout of snow here, and we probably had 22-degree weather last week. So I was not excited to see the snow either.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
And for those of you that don't know where I am in Peterborough, Ontario. So we're used to the cold, but when it comes like that, we're not ready for it.
Oh man, no,
So you
totally.
are no stranger to travel. Let's go back to when you were young. You were playing soccer in Calgary, but then your dad got a job and you moved to Indonesia. Tell us a little bit about what that was like.
Oh my God. Yeah, you've done your homework. I'm so anyway, I'm not super young, so I have a lot of stories. But yeah, so we moved. So my dad's an engineer and he worked in the oil business. So we headed over to Jakarta, Indonesia, which I literally wouldn't have been able to find on the map before we moved there. And the culture shock was unbelievable. I think, I'm a huge believer in education, but what you can learn from traveling, it's hard to replicate really, unless you experience it. And I remember being there and the first week realizing, first of all, the technology, like the buildings, the structure and the architecture was unbelievable. But beside this like Gotham City type, looking building, you would have like a slum really with people that were living in cardboard boxes. It's about 32 degrees Celsius every day. They're on the equator essentially. So just to see the difference between the rich and the poor, and just really seeing the poverty, and not really having the mind as such a young person to understand it,
Yeah.
because I just never seen anything like it at all. You see those like commercials on TV about poor kids around the world, but you don't actually know what it's like to there. So for me, soccer was my number one love. It has been for a long time, but that's kind of the only thing I cared about. So when we moved there, I was of course devastated because I wasn't able to play at the level that I wanted. But my first year there, I played with all the guys, which I loved. But the next year I was too old. And then I was the star midfielder for, if you can believe it, for the girls' high school, the women's high school team. And, but it was, when I look back, I am so grateful because I understood how lucky we are as Canadians in general. And also, I think at a very young age, I had an understanding for people that were just different than me, and that acceptance and love, and that we're all really connected. And also one thing that I'm really I appreciate there, it's about 80 to 85% Muslim,
Yeah.
and such a loving, wonderful culture. And I think I feel really lucky because I know there's a lot of negativity a lot of times, and there's a lot of blame when it comes to the Muslim faith. And it was just really great for me, I think, to be there and to be around so many loving Muslims, and realize that ignorance and hate is ignorance and hate. So
Yeah. And I think it could be a knowledge thing too, right? And not really understanding. And so for you to be in that culture and to really see it firsthand, you got a great experience, right? For what
yeah,
it really is.
absolutely. And my like love for cooking started then. Like
Awesome.
that's when the street meat started. And I was sick for like a month and a half straight. And ever
Yeah.
since then, my stomach, I literally can eat anything now. And so I'm also grateful for that. And I will try anything. So
Yeah. Well, with that, I wanted to, so this is all about just helping young people. And
yeah,
you talked a little bit about privilege. And I know that there is an elitist status that's happening with sport. And sometimes it's if you have enough money, then you get to play. And I think making sure that kids realize how lucky they are that maybe parents are sacrificing for them to be able to play, and not realizing what other situations are. What would you say to a young person who's, on a AAA hockey team, who has all the new gear, who has a brand new warm up, and doesn't even realize it's not their fault that they have that life, right? That's just the way that it is. But in order for them to open their eyes and appreciate that, what would you say to a young person?
Well, that's hard, because like you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
But having said that, and I didn't really know that until I was in a situation where I realized that people literally have nothing. But yeah, I think that's hard. Like I think the notion of empathy and putting yourself in other people's shoes is really important. And um, I'm not a parent yet. I would like to be at some point, but I do think that's so important. And it's like I said before, it's not about understanding, or sometimes you may not ever be able to understand what it is like fully to be someone else. And this often comes up with race, I find,
Mhm.
especially right now. But I think what you can do is try to imagine what it's like, um, and just that perspective. And what I try to practice as much as possible is gratefulness. And what I've started to realize with a lot of the people that I work with is when you start to realize and appreciate the things that um, you have this huge perspective shift. And at first, it starts out as, oh, this is so cool. I have like brand new gear. But then it starts to be like, oh, I have clean water that I can drink from the tap. Or right now I'm able to walk outside. Maybe I have to have a mask on, or, but you kind of start realizing more and more the floodgates open.
Right.
And I think that can be practiced as a family and as an individual. But my grandma, she's passed away now, but she lived to be 97 years old. And one of my tattoos is "Aren't we lucky?" Because she said that every single day and just really acknowledged what she does have. So I think just even the awareness of that, like look at the stuff that you have, and that can be definitely something I think can happen in the family.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. Thank you.
Yeah.
Uh, with your younger years too, you struggled with an eating disorder. Is that correct?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
What can young people learn from your experience? What are the signs and symptoms that coaches can look for, that parents can look for? What did you learn going through that experience as a young person?
Yeah. Well, for anyone who has had an eating disorder, it's something that um, I would say doesn't really leave you. Um, if I'm being really honest, I think it starts oftentimes because I've read some research on it. It starts two things. Your relationship with your body image, of course, it's an obvious one, but also this sense of control, because it is something that you can control. Um, and I think for me, I was in Jakarta and I went from being one of the fittest athletes in Canada to being one of the big girls, because I was, in Indonesia and everyone was quite petite. And for me, that was an adjustment. Um, and then I thought, because I was just so much bigger than everyone, it was a bad thing.
Okay.
And what I haven't really done until the last 5 or 6 years is focus on my self-worth and my self-love, but also really just accepting myself for exactly who I am. So I was bullied a lot in the 5th grade
Okay.
because I was overweight, and I was bullied every day. And it was tragic in the sense that now when I look back, I was exactly who I wanted to be in the 5th grade. Maybe I was a little overweight, but I had like a full on mullet. I had like these Reebok kicks, the white sneakers, and
Yeah.
I just had this like swagger. And all I wanted to do was draw Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I was obsessed with sports, and it was
Amazing.
me. It
Yeah.
was me. You know what I mean? And then I got bullied, and so I lost a bunch of weight. And funny, I will talk about you know sexual orientation later, but I lost a bunch of weight. I became the popular girl. I grew my hair out, and I started kind of flirting with a boy. And I was skinny and feminine, and so I was cool.
Okay.
And for this long time I became kind of like stuck in this box, and I
Yeah.
had to like um keep that front. And that's, I think, also part of the eating disorder. I felt if I was skinny, then I was still the cool girl. And so it was a struggle for a really long time. And I still, if I have dessert or whatever, I still have a little bit of guilt, but now I am in a way better place. And my relationship with food is better. My relationship with my body image is better. And I'm also in a place where I'm very proud of who I am, which makes a huge difference.
Yes.
And that's hard as a young person because you're
Yeah.
figuring stuff out,
Well, and then your belief system is based on what your peers are telling you. So you're being told all the time, well, whatever they're saying when they're bullying you, I believe, well, you can correct me, but that becomes part of what you think is normal. So then you've got this contradiction between what you believe as who you are, and that's truth. But then
Right.
you've got this other story that's being told by everybody else around you. So what do you believe, right? That's got to be really hard.
Right. And I think for a long time I just believed that being who I truly was not okay
Right.
because that's what I got bullied for. That's what I made sense of in my head. So I think that was also really the struggle. And then to finally be true to who I am, it took a long time to get there.
Yeah. How cool would it be though for a young person listening to this right now to be like, you know what? I'm in the fifth grade and I want to learn these things and I'm going to do it.
Oh, totally. And it's crazy because one thing in our program that we talk about all the time and made a huge shift in my life is just focusing on the things we can control.
Yeah.
And others and their opinions, we really don't have control over that.
Yeah.
People are always going to have their opinions,
Right.
rightly or wrongly, and to be okay with knowing that they may not be yours.
Right. And now you
That's
were flirting with boys. Were you interested in girls at that time?
no, well, to be honest, I didn't really know. It took me a while. I have a number of wonderful role models in my family,
Okay.
but it was this kind of thing when you don't really know about it. And it obviously was not socially accepted at that time. So I just almost had like a mental block. If I can look back, I, I was really into like Star Wars and
Yeah.
some movies where like the lead, like Natalie Portman was the lead in one of those Star Wars. And I would watch Star Wars over and over and over. And like, there's signs, but I was like, wasn't really sure. And I think the real sign was like when I came out to my sisters and they were like, oh yeah. And I was like, oh, okay, got it.
And they already were they cool with you?
Yeah. I do think that like my older sister knew. And I've been really, really just fortunate. It was harder for my mom, I think,
Okay.
because moms want to protect you.
Yeah, yeah,
Parents in general want to protect you. But yeah, for my sisters, they didn't care. And which was, it meant a lot, obviously, at the time. When you come out, you think the world's going to end. And when it doesn't, it's pretty nice.
yeah. Nice. I played with women growing up and through college and after university, and there were four women that are now happily living with their lesbian partners, some wives. And I think that's amazing for me to be able to say that they were able to get married to another woman. But when we played together, they weren't comfortable sharing that with any of us. And I felt really sad because again, same thing as a teammate, you kind of knew, there were some things that were going on and there was hesitation when it came to, talking about guys that you wanted to date or going to parties and, flirting and that kind of thing. And I always felt same as what you're talking about, where you can't really just be who you are because you're worried about what your peers are going to say. And now that I hope that we're on this trajectory to make things a little more normalized so that people have role models like you where a young person can look up and say, you know what, that's something that I don't have to question because it's there for me. You're an example for me. And so I really appreciate that you're openly able to talk about this and that there's so many loving couples that you can look up to and just say, that is love, that's all that it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I came out as a response to the Sochi Olympics because there was so much hostility and negativity really around and homophobia around those games. And
Yeah.
Anastasia came out publicly, and at the time I was kind of debating, and this is when, I had that conversation with my mom,
Okay.
when, because everybody knew in my circles that I was gay, but it was about having the conversation with my mom and saying, like, I have to do this, mom, because one day, like, kids won't have to come out.
Right.
They'll just be whoever they want to be and love whoever they're going to love, and there won't be these labels, and it won't matter.
Yeah.
And then, so we kind of, I went ahead with it. And I mean, nothing really changed that much. It was just, now it was out there. I do think the trans community right now needs a lot more support. And Quinny recently on the women's national team came out as transgender,
Mhm.
and they have done an incredible amount of work already. And I think it's they're I right away when they came out didn't even realize I was cisgender,
Okay.
and so I started really looking into the information. Here I am, representing the LGBTQ plus community, and I don't know my stuff, and so I've taken it quite seriously. And yeah, and I definitely think the trans community, one, it hasn't been ignored, but I definitely think when you look at especially in Latin America, the suicide rate, and how I think the average lifespan is like 34 or 35 for a transgender person in Latin America. It's sad and heartbreaking, really. So we have come a long way. I think we have a long way to go. I will never forget the first day John Herdman, who was our national team head coach at the time, said, if you want to bring your girlfriends or your boyfriends to the game or whatever, and that changed everything for me. And I think a lot of people on the team, and if there's any advice I can give to coaches, and I know we're talking about coaching the youth, is like, and even in your own households, is saying it like it's not a weird, like your boyfriends or your girlfriends, like,
Yeah.
kids are smart and they pick up on everything, right? And I think it finally, I felt, okay, I can just be me. I can talk about my partner without looking around being like that uncomfortable feeling. And I think that's been a really big shift. And so when people, and I do it all the time, who are you dating? I just try to keep it neutral, because you want to make sure that people feel comfortable. And that's why, now when I'm writing my emails, I, put my preferred pronouns.
Okay.
And I think for me, that was a big step. And it opens the door for anyone in any community to really, say, okay, these are my pronouns. Because sometimes that can be even a difficult way to start a conversation. Or so I think just thinking inclusive as you can, makes it easier for people who may have hesitations about it.
Yeah, and I think it also sets the tone. So if a coach is saying, "Yeah, bring your girlfriend or boyfriend," not a big deal. And then there's no, like side talk. There's no snickering. There's no like little conversations going on. It's just like, coach is saying this, and so we trust him or her, and so this is just how it is. And I think
Right.
that role model, it also feeds into your belief system. So if you have a really influential person that has their own beliefs and they're impressioning that upon the young people, of course they're going to form that as part of what they're going to use growing up. And so we have a huge impact as coaches, and we have to make sure that we're very cautious about how we use that.
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, with the research that we've done with the Mindful Project, like, quality of life um, matters. Stress and anxiety matter. And so if you think about just from a success period standpoint, if you want to get the most out of your athletes,
Yeah.
they have to feel comfortable in an environment. They have to feel like they're appreciated, their quality of life. They don't have, if they feel stressed or anxious about being who they truly are, that decreases performance. So I think for, the human in them, of course, that's number one, but also just getting the most out of your athletes, those things matter.
Yeah. I thought I saw in one of your interviews, correct me if I'm wrong, that you said that you were an overthinker, that there's a lot running through your brain all the time. Is that right? Yeah.
Yes,
And then,
that's
feeding into the performance side of things, now think about a young person who's confused about their sexuality. Think about someone who may be bullied. Think about someone who, has all of this running through their brain all of the time. And now you're saying, okay, now go out and perform, right?
right.
Like that just has a huge impact on where they're able to bring their mindfulness, where they're able to stay present. And so, yeah, if you can talk about what you guys are working on in that respect, how can we calm that craziness that's constantly going on in the brain?
Right. So, so this is kind of cool. So every human being has an attention box, and you cannot grow your attention. You can only divide your attention. So
Okay.
the average human being, 60% of the time, their thoughts are about the future, and 30% of the time, their thoughts are about the past. So that's on average. So
Yeah.
only 10% of the time, you're in the present moment. So so like we said, when you're going like this, like that's where the stress and anxiety comes from. So existing more often in the present, so you can shift those percentages. You become obviously more efficient. You become more loving, kind, patient, all these things. You become a better human being, but you also are literally practicing being in the zone,
Okay.
which as athletes, that's what we want, right? We ideally want to be in the zone. So that was kind of the first concept for me. Pairing mindfulness and sport is seemed like a no-brainer. I've also partnered up with Dr. Rachel Linval, who has her doctorate in mindfulness research. And I'm a very proud geek, and I just love going through all of her research. And, you get to be a guinea pig, really. Like I get to try out all these different breathing techniques and seeing the research, just how incredible it is. It seemed we were like, we got to share this with the world,
Yeah.
you know. And personal development is a massive passion of mine. My girlfriend literally takes the piss because I'm finally reading a fiction book at the
Okay.
age of 37, because I've only ever read these self-improvement books, right? So so anyway, we've paired these together, personal development and mindfulness. And that's our new high performance program. And really at the root of it, you talked about Dr. Kerry Evans in the intro.
Yeah.
When he came on board with the national team, he's now working with the New Zealand All Blacks. He's a boss. Anyway, he came on board and he was like, presence comes from being present in the moment. And I was like, okay, how do I do that more often? And he's
Mhm.
like, just breathe. And when like people give you tips and you're like waiting for this like genius thing and you're like, what? And he was like, I tell all the guys on the rugby team, if you're in the heat of it, breathe in for 3 seconds and breathe out for 4, and count the numbers,
Mhm.
and just always have a longer out breath. And that is it, right? So the science behind it is a longer out breath calms your parasympathetic nervous system, which it calms you down, you make clear decisions, you're more present. And then the counting like gets you out of your head, because you're like 1, 2, 3. I'm sure if you saw me do this on the field, you would also take the piss. But anyway, but it works, and it's crazy. And it doesn't just work on the field, it works everywhere. So another thing that we also researched is when we're stressed, a lot of times if you're stressed out, you breathe from your chest, and
Mhm.
it's like shallow breaths, which makes you more tense, which just it's like blah, 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 you like can't catch up.
Yeah.
So when I'm doing this breathing exercise, sometimes I put my hand on my belly, but if you breathe from your diaphragm, same thing, automatically calms you down. And so I started with these tricks. I mean, obviously I'm a goalkeeper, so I'm not like doing the hand on the belly in the middle of training. But and also like simple tricks like and I did this on a guided relaxation introduction this weekend. When you open your vision,
Mhm.
it naturally also calms you down. So as an athlete, if you're looking now, if I'm a goalkeeper, so if I'm looking at my fullback on my right and my fullback on my left, and I'm seeing everything
Yeah.
just by opening my vision, I'm calming down. So there's all these like little tricks that are in the program, of course, but yeah, just there's that side, and then there's the personal development side,
Mhm.
I have always been my worst critic nonstop. And what I realize is I've learned this behavior to
Mhm.
be hard on myself, to be like, oh, whatever. And the research shows when you show self-compassion, when you've made mistakes, you learn quicker because you realize, okay, it's okay. I made a mistake. You move on. You basically park the emotions.
Yeah.
Um, and then you just take the gold from it and move on. Whereas if you're hard on yourself and mean to yourself, it feels bad, but then you're less inclined to try and push your limits, which is when you make mistakes, right? So all these things they're all thrown in there, and yeah, it's something I'm obviously passionate about, but try to live day to day, and it's just made such an impact on my life that yeah, we hope to share it everywhere.
I think it'll be amazing for so many people to learn. And I don't think it's something that coaches would naturally gravitate towards. There's the physical component, there's, the coaching courses that you take, and very little is talked about the mental side of sport. And well, we're starting to get there. I think it's obviously, you were talking about, Olympic athletes that are working with sports psychologists, and there's a lot of more conversation that's happening about how that can be so beneficial in terms of how your physical play is. So I think we're getting there. And so more conversations like this is going to make it just probably, hopefully, even just something very simple that you said, if we can just teach our athletes to breathe,
Yeah,
start there, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think there's a lot of stigma around mental health. I know, like Bell, there's a lot of companies that are doing really wonderful things to go towards it.
Yeah.
I know Silken Lauman is one of my heroes,
Yeah.
and she has, worked her tail off to go towards a lot of this stuff. And a lot of athletes across Canada are doing this. And I think at the end of the day, like mental health, if your mental health is not okay, it affects everything. So, so it's so important, not just for success, but just in life. So I think it's a wonderful shift that we've made in our country. Absolutely.
Yeah. So long-term athletic development is getting a lot of traction. We're trying to figure out what we can do with our young people in order to make sure that we're developing them properly. But I think even just that term, long term, puts us into the future. And so you've already talked about how we're always there. We're always thinking about, well, what's going to happen in the future? Same with athletes, where you say, here's my goal. My goal is to make it to the Olympics. My goal is to make it to the NHL. My goal is to make it to whatever it is, but future, 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 right? And so, in order for us to stay present, how can we have this long term vision, but then also be able to just stay where we are?
Super great question. So, so planning in the future and learning from past mistakes are awesome things.
Okay.
I mean, I'm taking a goal setting course right now
Okay.
on top of a lot of other courses, but and it talks about people that set goals are 10 times more effective at accomplishing them than ones that don't. So I definitely think having an end in mind, something to work towards is brilliant. I
Mhm.
also think when you are goal setting, it's really important to make it something that you can measure.
Okay.
So I really believe in self-evaluation. And if you read all the personal development books, they always say it's clutch to be able to evaluate yourself, but to focus always first on the effort.
Okay.
Because if you give 100% of your effort into something, can you actually fail? You know what I mean? That to put it in that perspective. So have your goals, have measurable steps. The problem with goal setting oftentimes is people have these like lofty goals and they're
Okay.
like, I'm going to go to the Olympics.
Right. Right.
And it's like there's a billion steps between here and there, right? So having manageable steps, having the self-compassion as you're going through these steps, that maybe you don't make them, or maybe you have to adapt and reevaluate your plan as you go along. I think that's really important. But also just being intentional about that. Also looking at the past, like going over game footage, um, learning from your past mistakes is so incredibly important with purpose. So
Mhm.
being intentional about it. What I'm talking about as far as like the past and the future is worrying about things again, like that are not in our control. Like I always have this conversation with teams and it's quite funny. I'm like, can you control if you win a game or not? And they're all like, yeah. And I'm like, no, you can't actually, because what if you have a referee that makes a decision in the last minute of the game and they get a PK and there's a lot of things outside of your control, but you can control your attitude. You can control like your mindset and your effort always.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of focusing on the things they can control, that is in the moment, that will reflect hopefully on the outcome.
Right.
But the stress comes from like, oh, I hope I don't mess up again.
Right.
And you're thinking about something that happened and you're bringing it into right now and worrying about what will happen, you know, and we all do that. We think of, you know, like worst case scenario, this is going to happen. And there's some like crazy statistic that like 85% of the time it never happens. So we're literally like dreaming of the worst case and it just doesn't happen. So why are we wasting our energy? Right.
Right.
So being intentional about the future, being intentional about learning from the past are so important. But when you are doing a task, all you're doing is focusing on that effort and your attention, because that's really all you can do in the moment.
Right.
And the nice thing about being intentional about both of the future and the past is because you've already done the work, then it kind of frees you up to just be in that moment.
Yeah, which is a lovely feeling, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Now you have been hurt 3 significant times, I'm sure many more times, but let's talk about that a little bit. So your goal is to, you know, perform and all of a sudden you get hurt and that goal, the goal is no longer there because now you're injured and now you're set back and you have to figure out what the steps are to get back to where you were. And even at the beginning of this conversation, you said, finally, I was healthy. Finally, I was, you know, in a good place. And then COVID happened. So it's like, how do you handle injury or the change that might happen along the path to get to your goal?
Yeah. So again, perspective, I'm a big believer in mindset, but I've had, yes, a lot of injury, 3 major knee surgeries and a big shoulder surgery. And every time it's happened, I have grown as a human being.
Okay.
Because I think you kind of have the choice to stand still or grow.
Yeah.
And what it's always allowed me is to kind of evolve in a different way. So I think when it comes to injury, there's 2 things. You have to be creative. Because visualization, if you do it really well and activate as many senses as possible, your body literally almost doesn't know the difference. Your mind doesn't know the difference. So there's a ton of power in visualization. There's also connecting your mind with your body. This is really important. I think, especially as young athletes, there's so much burnout and so many injuries because they're not listening to their body. That was me as well.
Yeah.
But I think as well, so there's a whole like, you know, reinventing yourself is what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
There's also accepting that you're going to have like days where you feel like crap, because the one thing you probably love the most isn't as accessible as it was. So kind of giving yourself permission to feel like crap, like, and feel sad. And I think there's a lot of pressure to be like, I'm fine, you know, and a lot of times you're doing your rehab and then you're watching your team do fitness and you're like, it's horrible. You know, you're like, I want to be there and you can't do that. And so I think giving yourself permission to have your bad days. And then the huge part is your identity.
I was just going to say that. I was just going to make a note here. I was going to say we're leading to identity, and yes, go, carry on.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, the reason, so the 2016 Olympic qualifiers, I tore my ACL in the warm-up of the game that I played that put us to the Olympics, that sent us to the Olympics. So, you know, we're celebrating and I know I'm not going, but it was incredible for the team. And that year was so hard for me. I was depressed. I was miserable. And I realized that I had, and this is something that I had done, I had made football my whole life and it was who I was.
Yeah.
And without it, I didn't know who I was anymore.
Right.
And and it was scary because I had gone through injuries before. I was just so focused on evolving and evolving. But you know, later in my life, and I'm like, who am I? Couldn't watch the games. I was like stressed. I was a wreck. And it was so important for me because then I started to really dive into, well, who am I?
Hmm.
Where do I get my confidence from? What am I proud of? And I went through a lot of like reflection, and I realized that I knew exactly who I was. And I realized that I was also a sister and a daughter and a teammate and a partner and all these other things.
Yeah.
But I had just put all my attention into one thing. And when I didn't have that anymore, all the other things were gone.
Right.
Since then, I have worked on all my other identities, and also who I am. Like I've really embraced who I am. And um, sport is something that comes and goes, and most athletes have to retire at some point, and then do something else. And I think that was my biggest lesson, that the only one who gets to define who I am is me, not a sport, not a coach's decision. And that I think is my biggest learning from my injuries, that I'm so grateful for, because now I can go and, like, you know, throw a ball in the goal and have a horrible game and come home and still be proud of who I am. And I
Nice.
think that that matters
Yeah,
because I
that's
didn't
huge.
have it.
So did you go back and feed your fifth grade self with some sweet kicks and a t-shirt that you wanted to wear and
Yeah, I look at photos. I actually have, where do
throw them in
I
your back?
yeah, I for the longest time I had a photo of me. I was like, I can't even tell you the amount of swagger I had in my face. And I was like, yeah, you know, you just
There she
gotta
is.
own it. There it is, exactly. So
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I know, okay, so we talked about a lot of deep stuff, and I think I heard this in one of your interviews too, that's like when you have a conversation, sometimes you go off the deep end and just get really serious with people. Is this true?
oh yeah, like I used to be really good at small talk, and I have lost that.
Yeah,
That
me too. I'm totally like that too. I would really like to have a good conversation, but I want to bring some fun into for the listeners. And I would love, because people just want to know what it's like to be an Olympian. They want to know, like, 4 times at the World Cup and 2 Olympic appearances. And so, like, that's huge. That's something that people just don't get to experience. So what is your favorite memory from all of that? Or do you have a really cool story that we may not have heard of just from being the viewer at home?
oh, well, I do think okay, I remember that France game in 2012. It was for the bronze medal, and
Yeah.
they were destroying us. It was like they had 27 shots, we had 2. I think one of them was a goal. And I remember it was like the 90th minute. And I remember thinking, God, I am so tired. I hope that we score a goal. You know, I'm a goalkeeper. And anyway, Diana Madison puts the goal away. We're like celebrating. And I was so freaking tired at the end of the game. I just went down on my knees, and Rian Wilkinson came over and gave me a huge hug. And I remember in that moment, like my whole life flashed by me. I was 5 years old watching the TV 1988 Calgary Olympics, watching Elizabeth Manley get a silver medal, and I was bawling. And I knew then, I'm like, I'm going to the Olympics. And like this whole thing, I thought, you know, it fast forwards all the work that you do, all the like kicking the ball against the fence and all those runs I did by myself in like minus 30-degree weather.
Yeah.
And in that moment, it was like, this is it. It was for this. You know, it was such a powerful, and I was exhausted, but like that's how you want to feel. Like I had
Yeah.
nothing left. And it was just, it's so wonderful. And to share it with that group of women,
Yeah.
like we got together for the Olympic Hall of Fame, and man, they're just a bunch of badasses. Like every one of them is doing something spectacular. I think because when you get a taste of success as a group and you realize, like, when you can connect with people and get the most out of each other, it's such a wicked, awesome feeling. And then I think the other amazing moment was in 2015, the World Cup at home. I remember just playing in front of 50,000 people every game
Yeah.
with
Incredible.
with like 50,000 Canadian flags, and the amount of pride, like it, you can't even, I couldn't sleep at night. I was just so excited and revved up, and
Yeah.
just like an honor that I got to
And the
experience.
country was too. We were all excited too.
Oh my God. It was just literally, I couldn't sleep. Like I was like hitting the melatonin. I was having like sleepy time tea, and I was trying to like meditate and read. And it was just like, I was a mess, but I wouldn't change it for the world. It was such an honor.
Yeah. So are you present in that moment when you're just exhausted and you're just taking it all in? Were you able to just take it in?
Oh yeah. I
Yeah.
remember like even the anthems. I'm a very emotional person
Oh, they
anyway,
make
but
me
I'm
cry
just like,
every time. I cry every
oh,
time I hear them.
and I'm like, keep it together. And I'm just, you know,
Yeah.
and anyway, it's funny because a lot of my teammates can't sing. So it's actually a good thing because it would just distract me long enough so that I wouldn't be bawling my eyes out.
Yeah, I remember my husband used to run marathons, and the energy from all of those people. We're downtown Toronto, everybody's getting amped up, the music is going, and I'm walking down the street and I'm just like bawling my eyes out. I'm like, where is this coming from? It just like hits you in your soul. It's
Oh my God.
crazy.
It's
Yeah,
nuts.
so I could not imagine you like having all of that attention on you. And then, obviously it's a group thing and you guys work so hard together to get there, and such a strong group of women. And I'm just so proud. It's so great.
Thank you. Yeah. It's an
Okay, we only have a little bit of time left, so maybe I'll just do like a speed couple of questions,
Oh
because there's
God. Okay.
as we went through,
You're like, keep your answers short.
no, I like it when guests talk a lot, because then I don't have to.
Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna go a little bit back to playing with the boys. Do you think that that's a good thing? Do you think co-ed sports is a good thing?
Absolutely. I think because there's different development processes and at different stages, I think it's great because you're able to learn and constantly challenge yourself and one another in different ways. So yes, very
And then
much.
also different ages. So not just different genders, different ages as well. Do you believe that kids should be playing with each other?
Yeah, I played up a lot, like the age above me when I was young. And I think there's two components. It's always nice to just continually challenge yourself from a skill standpoint, but
Yeah.
also I think from a social standpoint, because learning to be out of your comfort zone is really important for leadership and team connection. I think one thing I pride myself is always welcoming the new kids
Nice.
because that's hard, and I think that's something that you learn from constantly being a new kid. Yeah,
You
you guys.
talked about having a really good experience with John Herdman, supporting you and having a big impact you in a positive way. Do you have any negative experiences with coaches where maybe you could shed some light on how a coach might be talking to their athletes that may not get the best out of them?
Yeah, and I can speak to a personal experience because now I know the research that if a coach actually yells at a player and is negative when they do something wrong, it
Mhm.
actually, like I said, the way you talk to yourself, same effect. It slows the learning process. So if
Okay.
a coach can look at it that way, you're actually hindering their growth by yelling at them.
Okay.
And if they're already a high performer and wanting to do well, if they've made a mistake, they know it.
Yeah.
So they don't need to be reminded of it. So I think when it comes to feedback from coaches, it's again, the focus is, okay, maybe they've done this. Instead of saying you did that wrong, say, try this, or give them options
Yeah.
because they're also trying to figure out how they can do it different or better.
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing. I also think being conscious of what you say to parents and to players.
Yeah.
I think sometimes as a player, I've gotten wind of what my coach has said about me to other players,
Okay.
and um, and I think that's hard. I think if you're a coach, the best service you can give your players is telling them what they need to work on to their face
Okay.
and keeping it there.
Yeah.
Um, because when you are an athlete and you're young and you want to do really well, when you hear coaches say something about you that might not be positive, it will crush you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So we're all basically insecure, but um, I think also just that respect, because when a coach tells me that they want me to work on this or this is my area of growth, I know right away that they care enough about me to say it to my face, but also challenge me to become better. And that's kind of what I think coaches, you want to have an environment where people want to learn
Yeah.
and make it okay to talk about these areas. And nobody's perfect, but having it being a welcoming or not welcoming, it's always a little bit hard to get feedback, but having it be from a place where you know the intentions of your coach. And I think if you have established that, then you will grow together a lot quicker.
Yeah, that's awesome. When you're working with other women, so what I've experienced at a young age, I feel like there's a lot of self-confidence things with young girls.
Mhm.
And especially coaching young girls, I know you lead from the back, so you're having to send out all kinds of information really loud and then throw yourself into a stadium where you've got fans on top of that. You have to be crazy confident with what you're saying and how you're leading. How could we impress upon young girls to be vocal, but then also to not be self-conscious about it?
So this is kind of, it's an interesting question in the sense that communication is imperative to be successful.
Hmm.
What I like about communication is when you're giving communication, it means that you're looking around you,
Okay.
and that is great for being present in the moment. So I think first of all, giving any communication is important, and I think that um, everyone has different communication styles, and everyone has different comfort levels.
Okay.
So I think when you are first starting, it's about just saying something. Really, that's kind of the first step. Acknowledging what's around you, then your vision awareness gets better, your communication gets better. And it's just like anything. If you practice something, you become more comfortable at it. So just whatever form it comes at, if someone's whispering, shift to your left or shift to your right, just to continually support that,
Yep.
because they'll become more confident. Their vision will get better, their communication will get better. And I think the other thing that I got from Dr. Carrie Evans, which was so important, was tone.
Okay.
An awareness thing as well, but your tone. So as a goalkeeper, my job is to tell my teammates when there's something dangerous going to happen.
Yep.
But other than that, it's just little information. No, there's a player on your left, there's a player on your right. And then if something's about to go down,
Yeah.
your tone changes, because as humans, we notice the shift in the tone.
Okay.
So bringing awareness to that as a young person, you kind of start, you can hear the difference. You can hear when it's, a heated situation. You can hear when it's just simple instruction. So just that awareness alone, then they can start to really focus on their communication, and not just that, make a difference so they can be heard.
Right. Wow, you've given us so much information. It's amazing. And just your insight and your experience. I even said to you before we started chatting that I feel like you've lived so much more than the time that the years that you've been alive, and just a lot of wisdom, right? And so I really appreciate this. We will wrap up because I don't want to take up any more of your time. I so appreciate the time that you've given me. I want to make sure that everybody can find your program. You can find Erin McLeod and the Mindful Project at mindfulproject.ca. And I will link Erin's social handles below this video for you to find more information there. Is there anything else that you want to leave us with? Any other insight that you wanted to make sure that you passed along, or did we hit it all?
I think we got it all. Oh my gosh, I think.
Yeah, no, that was so good. So I really appreciate it. For anybody that's looking for when the new episodes drop, my website is rhiannaposkin.com. And with that, I will also be sending out youth strength and conditioning information to just help well-round our youth athletes and give some coaches and parents just a little bit of tips that they can use with their young people. So
Awesome.
thank you so much, Erin, for joining me.
Thank you for having me on. It's great.
Take care.
Okay.